Yes. Would you ask Mr. Norman to come in, please? Okay. All right, happy to carry on, I hope.
Yes, yes.
Good, thank you. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Ms. Norman, thank you for coming back. There are just one or two further questions I've got which arise out of some of this morning's evidence, which I've had a chance to think about over lunch, so bear with me.
Okay.
First of all, is there, to your knowledge, or was there at the night of Grenfell, a policy in the control room of not taking people's names, callers' names?
That's not a policy, it's more of a personal choice.
Right. So when you say personal choice, you mean it's up to any CRO to get the name or not?
Yeah, some people take names, some people don't. I will only tend to take names with children. It's kind of a parent-child thing. If you speak to them, they react to you a bit more if you use their name.
Right. And is it helpful, in your experience, to have the name?
I think it can
not?
be on a prolonged call. I think it can be helpful because you build up a sort of repertoire with the person that you're speaking to.
Yeah. Okay. Now, we talked in terms, when I showed you the stay put policy in Appendix 3 of Policy 539, about what stay put is and how you then move from stay put to FSG.
Yeah.
As part of the question about assessment of whether or not somebody can get out or not,
Yeah.
I think you said you don't normally or ask questions about disability or mobility issues or the age or health of the caller.
No.
Would it not be helpful, though, to know about those things so that when you're assessing the chances of exit, if you like, you would be in a better position to have that information?
I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with that, but we tend to wait for the callers to give us that information. They would, because when we say, why can't you get out, they will usually say because they have mobility issues or because they're elderly and have trouble walking, etc., etc. It's very rare for them not to give that information to us.
Right. Can I ask you then to look at the call we looked at earlier at 125:16 from flat 111, which you took, and it's LFB 308. LFB 308. First of all, on page 2, we can just look at it. You're told, in the fourth entry down, there's a fire going on in Grenfell Tower, I'm in the tower block. And then you're told by the caller, just below halfway down, I'm on the 14th floor, it's right on, it's coming right past my window from next door. You say, right, the fire's actually on the 4th floor. And he says, it's on the 14th. And you say, no, it's on the 4th. And he's 1, 2, 3, 4. And he says, well, I'm on the 14th. And then you go on over the page to talk about flat numbers. At that stage in the conversation, why were you... Well, let me ask you this. Did you think you had more information about the fire than the caller did?
No, I didn't think I had more information. I just... I think I was finding it very hard to comprehend how the fire at that time could have reached his floor.
I see. Okay. So
that's just from past experience. Sorry, that's just from past experience. I've never known anything like that to happen. So.
Right, I follow. So would you normally seek to correct a caller who was telling you that the fire was on his floor?
We would normally tell a caller where the fire is if they're in a high rise.
Right.
It's also to. It might be lull them into a false sense of security, which is probably what's happened here, but you don't want to panic a caller that's panicked even more if you do know that that's the situation at that point.
Right. Okay. So can I summarise your evidence that on this particular passage it was your sense of disbelief that led you to correct him, even though he was there and you weren't? I
couldn't believe that the fire was actually on the 14th floor, no.
Now, he then goes on to say, in answer to your question, have you got smoke coming up into your property? This is a page at 3. It's right outside my window. And then you have a discussion about whether there's smoke inside the flat. And on page 5, which is what I want to focus on with you, you say, come they will get up to you. When they can, they will. No, love, I can't even get out, love, on my... And then you say, right, so stay where, right, listen, stay where you are. I can't get out. Now, is there a reason why you didn't investigate more with this caller why he couldn't get out?
Not that I can recall, no. Had he said to me before about the smoke coming in, or was that after?
That's
before.
So looking at the page before, on page 4, he tells, well, you say in the middle of the page. Well, let me start above that. He says there's fire inaudible all in my house, all on my side. I'm not burning. No, okay. So what I'm asking is there any smoke in your flat? Yeah, I can smell it. You'll be able to smell it, but is there anything else? No. Right, so the safest thing for you to do for now is to stay where you are. I'll pass a message to the crews to say that you're in your flat number 111 on the 14th floor. Yeah. And then we get this passage about I can't get out. And then we see that, and I'll give you the context afterwards. You say, a third of the way down page 5, right, you need to listen. Smoke, I can't get out. I'm trying to open the door, and there's a lot of smoke. Inaudible, I can't get out. So you then say, right, so there's no smoke coming in, so you're safe where you are for now, okay. And later on page 6, just so you know it, he says, there's smoke coming in my flat now. And you say, stay where you are. And he says, it's coming from the landing. Now, my question really directed to this part of the call is there a reason why you didn't investigate with him the nature of the exit routes and what was actually stopping him getting out?
I wasn't actually giving him fire survival guidance advice. I was telling him he was safer to remain in his flat. That would probably come more into the case if I was actually giving him fire survival guidance advice. But no, I don't really recall, to be honest.
Right. So you weren't giving FSG at that stage?
No, I wouldn't say that was FSG.
You were giving, so what advice was it? It was essentially stay put.
It was to stay where you are.
Yeah.
It'd be safer to stay where you are. As I said, I didn't believe that the fire had spread that far.
No. Now, just continuing on the theme of giving him stay put advice, if you look at the bottom of page 6, Ms. Norman, and I just mentioned this to you, come back to it, you say, after your question, how many, 3/4 of the way down, how many people are in your flat? Just me. There's smoke coming in my flat now. All right, stay where you are. Just those two exchanges. When you're told there's smoke coming in my flat now, does that mean that he was affected by smoke?
Yes, it does, and that's why I told him to block the doors.
Yes, but given that he's now been affected by smoke, my question is it appropriate still to give him stay-put advice? Or would it be actually right then to move to examining the exits and whether he could make a safe alternative exit?
I believed at the time that was the correct advice to give him, and for him to call us back if it was getting worse, because it only just started coming in and blocking the doors. We were hopeful that they would be able to go up to him.
What I'm seeking to get a feel for is not just your personal understanding, but whether there's a general understanding in your control room about the moment when you move into stay put not being appropriate. And we've seen the policy.
Yeah.
You stay put unless you're affected by smoke, heat or fire.
Yeah.
And I'm really just trying to get from you what your understanding is as someone in that control room. You see that this caller is affected by smoke, but you still tell him to stay put.
Yeah, the smoke.
My question is, why is that?
Yeah, because the smoke had only just started coming into his flat. Initially, when he called, there was no smoke.
Right.
So I was hopeful that if he blocked the doors, that the smoke, he would be able to prevent the smoke coming in further. That's why I asked him to call us back if it did become any worse.
I follow. Would you, in your own mind, draw a distinction between smoke and fire? If he'd said, "My flat's on fire," what would you have said?
We would have gone through, is there any other means of escape?
Right.
And further protection for the caller.
Let's look at one other call, just so we can get a broader feel for that approach. 314, which is flat 175, which is a call you handled at 1:30:02. We looked at this before this morning, but looking at page 3, you're told 3 lines down, okay, oh, it's below us, query, okay, because the smoke's, over speaking, coming into my flat, what do I do? And again, you say, okay, you need to, the best thing you can do for now is if you stay in your flat unless it's safe to leave. I don't know what the stairwells and things are like. Block the doors. Now, just on that exchange, quite early on in that call, why did you not think, or perhaps did you think, but looks like you didn't think that the caller was affected by smoke within the meaning of the policy?
She said that her husband had already blocked the doors, didn't she? It's the same as the previous call we discussed. I feel that
Right.
it was if we could block the door and everything. And
Right.
they'd moved away to a further room, so...
Yeah. But given that you're told that smoke is affecting them, my question is, why didn't you then move to investigate whether there was a safe means of exit?
I don't know. I hadn't gone into full fire survival guidance advice with them, so...
And then, can I then take you to the call you made with CU8, where you'd passed on the information about these calls, which is it's INQ 194, where you're handing over the list. Can I start by taking you to the very start of this call? Perhaps you can clear something up for us, which has been a mystery for a while. Do you know who you were speaking to on CU8?
No, I don't.
Right. And then you say on page 3 lines up from the bottom, or 3 entries up, yeah, but they're all trapped by the smoke, okay. So you know that 175 and 111 are trapped, so they can't get out. So that's that. And then you go on to say, on page 194 in the middle, we've got one on the 18th floor, hold on, 18th floor, oh my God, there's so many. Top floor, adults at 8 adults and 8 children, smoke coming in. I don't know what number that is. And then at the end of the call, you say there's one on the 18th floor, but we don't. And then you say it's going to be every floor. So we need to get to that. That's page 5. Top of page 5. I'll just repeat that. There's one on the 18th floor, but we don't. It's going to be every floor, but we haven't got a number for that either. Now, did that mean to you that the entire tower block was affected at least by smoke?
From what I could hear going on in the background with the calls that people were taking, I was hearing floors from the top to the top right down that those floors were being affected by smoke. So yes, I did believe it was every floor.
And would that mean, or did you think at that time that meant that you then had, since everyone was affected by smoke, at least above the 4th floor, you then had to move into, or everyone had to move into, examining carefully the exit routes and conditions for anybody who called?
That would have been an ideal situation, but we just did not have the time to do that. We had so many calls coming in. I think we were more on the protecting the caller with stopping the smoke coming in than going into full fire survival guidance. We were saying to move to a room away from the fire, away from the smoke, sorry. Stop the smoke coming in to the room that you're in, and obviously contact us if the smoke becomes denser in your property.
Did it occur to you to tell the entire control room by this point, or perhaps slightly afterwards, everyone's affected by smoke, don't tell them to stay put, don't assume it's stay put, everyone should now examine very closely with each caller the exit routes so that they can work out, we can all work out whether they can get out?
No, it didn't, because I had absolutely no confirmation of the conditions inside that building, we could be sending them into more toxic and worse conditions than they actually were in their flats, where at that point they were able to sort of block the doors and not being overcome by smoke as such. Not knowing what we would be sending them out to felt more of a risk to me.
Yeah, yes. Not to argue with you about it, but we put this to you that in making that assessment, let me try it this way. You say that you had no confirmation of the conditions inside the building, that you could be sending them into more toxic and worse conditions. Did you do an assessment to work out whether that was the case or wasn't the case with each caller?
No.
No.
No, I didn't.
It's because it may vary, may it not, depending on where you are in the building as to whether the exit routes were safe or not?
Yes, of course. No, I didn't do that.
Okay. Now, can I turn to the change in stay put? On page 7 of your witness statement, in paragraph 4 on that page, you say, after the time mark of 2:45 at the beginning, that just after that, Scott Hayward arrived, followed by Adam Crinian, and Joe Smith came up to you and told you that the advice was now to get out and self-evacuate. You see that in the first 3 lines. Would you time your being told by Joe Smith about the change in stay put to after 2:45?
I had no recollection of the time, to be honest with you. As I said previously, a lot of the times were given to me after. I believe it was earlier.
You believe it was earlier than 2:45?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Right. Do you know how much earlier, roughly?
10, 15 minutes.
Okay. Do you recall being involved in any discussion about changing the stay put advice?
No, the discussion had been previously about how long some of the calls had been going on.
I see.
And as I say, we were coming to that hour point on some of those calls, which is when we know that the compartment is no longer as secure as we believed it would have been earlier.
Did you have that discussion with Joe Smith?
We talked about the hour line, yes,
Okay.
and what that meant.
Do you recall having any discussion with anybody, but including Joe Smith, before 2:45 about crews struggling to get above the 15th floor?
No.
You don't? Do you remember any discussion at all about that at that time?
I did hear, I don't recall the time, that crews were unable to get past a certain level, but I don't recall what level that was.
Right. And there were difficulties later in the night,
Yes.
10th, 11th floors.
Yes, yeah.
Is that perhaps what you're recalling?
The 11th floor rings a bell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you say in your statement, in the 3rd line, I believe she liaised with DAC Adrian Fenton and the on-ground commander Andy Rowe.
That's what I thought, yes.
Did you see or hear any discussion between Joe Smith and Adrian Fenton?
No, I saw them talking, but I didn't actually hear what was being said.
Right. Did you observe or were you party to any discussion with Andy Rowe about changing the stay put advice?
No, I didn't speak to Andrew on the night at all.
What is the basis of your belief that Joe Smith liaised with Andy Rowe about changing the stay put advice?
I remember Joanne mentioning about speaking to the incident ground and Adrian, so I thought it was Andy Rowe.
Right.
I think he was on scene or around that sort of time. Like I say, I've got my timings out a bit.
I see, okay. Does the name Steve West mean anything to you?
Yes, it does.
Who is he?
He's a group manager. He was shadowing the ORT people that night.
Right. Do you know from your own recollection whether he had any involvement on the incident ground in the decision to change the stay put advice?
No, I don't know.
Right. Now, when the stay put advice changed, you say, as you do on page 7 of your statement, that 2 lines on, I immediately passed this information on to all of my control room officers by writing on a piece of paper and showing it to the CROs.
Yes.
And then the writing was simply telling my CROs that we were now telling people to get out of the building, putting wet towels over their heads. Now, do you remember what exactly you wrote on the note?
Was it not in the bundle? I take it wasn't in the bundle of paper. That's a shame. It was all callers to evacuate. Tell callers, I can't can't remember the exact wording, but tell callers to put wet towels over their heads, to cover their faces and to hold hands
Right. Okay.
and to leave.
And that's from recollection, is it?
I remember that very clearly, yeah.
Now, you wrote that on a piece of paper. How was that? Did you go round?
It was on an A4 piece of paper,
Tell me
so I
what
was just going it round and I was sort of tapping the control officers because they were very involved in their calls. Read this. Have you read this? Do you understand?
I see. Okay.
And so I was confirming that they understood what I was saying to them. One person said, well, all floors. I remember that. And I was, yes, all floors.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you give any other advice other than what you've just told
Not
us?
at that initial time, no.
Did you give advice later?
I was going around helping people with some advice, yes.
Specifically on specific calls?
Yes, so Pete Duddy was taking a call and the callers seemed very reluctant to leave because they couldn't see. So I was sort of saying to him, look, just say to them, think about what way do you turn when you leave your flat to walk down to the stairs? Just close your eyes and just think about that and just do what comes automatically.
Now, Jo Smith said in her witness statement, and she confirmed this in her evidence when she came to the inquiry in July, the 12th of July, that CROs were advised to use more forceful and blunt language to emphasise the necessity to evacuate the building. Do you remember that advice being given?
Yes, I do.
Who gave that advice?
I think Joanne initially and I did it as well.
How did you give that advice?
Just say them, you have to tell them that this is what they have to do. They have no choice really now.
What I meant was, did you write it down?
I spoke to them.
You spoke to them?
I actually spoke to them then.
Did you speak to each of them individually, or did you make an announcement?
No, there was no announcement. They wouldn't have heard an announcement. They were so involved in their calls. I actually went up to people individually.
Right. Did you interrupt calls at any stage, or did you wait for the CROs to finish their call before giving this advice?
No, I was listening to what the CROs were telling them, and I could hear on some of them that people were very reluctant. And I was sort of just saying over them, you tell them they have to go. They have to go now. They have to leave.
Right.
They have no choice.
How confident were you at the time that all CROs got that message on board to give clear, unequivocal advice to leave?
As confident as anyone can be, really. I was reasonably confident, but I think each call would be different in how that was handled.
Right. Did you become aware, or were you aware at the time, that even after that time, well, let me back up a little bit. Roughly how long after the decision was made to change the stay put advice did you go round telling CRAs to advise people, come what may, they must leave?
I think it was ongoing for a while, to be honest with you. It was quite soon after.
Right, okay. Do you know from your own knowledge whether CROs obeyed that completely, or whether there were calls that kept going where they continued to give callers an option?
I don't know.
You don't know. At the foot of page 7, you say, this was the first time I have ever had an instruction like this. To be honest, I had felt that for some time we needed to get people out. I had not seen the tower, but I'm only saying this by the details of the calls we received from people inside the tower. At what point before the stay put advice was changed did you think that it needed to be changed?
I think it was coming up to that hour mark that I've spoken about, that the incident had been going on for an hour. We still were getting lots and lots and lots of calls for people that were trapped. Some of the calls had been ongoing for a while, and I was becoming very, very uncomfortable with it, much more so than I had been earlier on.
Right. So about an hour after the incident started would take one to about 2 a.m.
Roughly. I can't confirm the time.
No, but the hour mark is important, is it?
The hour mark is important, yes.
What does that tell you?
Well, that's the
length of the
when
call.
you feel that compartments are safe, you're safe to stay in your flat for up to an hour. So as we were approaching that hour,
Right.
So I think it might have just been slightly later than 2, to be honest, because it wasn't actually too long before Joanne came in.
No. Did you have any discussion with anybody in the control room about changing the stay put advice before Jo Smith came into the control room?
I have a vague recollection of talking to people. I can't remember who it was, though, about we need to get them out. But I can't remember who that was.
Right. Was it somebody senior to you, or was it a CRO?
No, I don't recall who it was.
All right.
I just have a vague recollection.
Okay. And how did that person react? Do you remember?
They agreed.
They agreed, right?
Yeah. It was a discussion that we both agreed on. I don't recall who instigated the conversation either, to be honest.
Yeah. Did there come a time prior to the change of the stay put advice that you were aware or you thought that the fire was out of control?
I'll probably be around that time, about 2-ish, because
Right.
it had been going on for a long time, and it had been going on over an hour, and but we still had nothing back from the fire ground, so we still had no confirmed details of what actually was going on.
No. And that answers my next question, which is, did you learn that from the fire ground? But the answer is, I think, no.
No.
So my next question then is, did you seek to find out yourself proactively from the incident ground?
So
what was happening?
around this time, Jason was in, and he was on the phone to the command unit constantly, and I actually asked him, we need to know what's going on. Are they able to reach people? Have they got anyone? Can you find out what's going on?
Right. Did you or anybody in the control room seek to speak to the incident commander at that time?
No, I didn't at that time.
Is there a reason for that?
I thought that because Jason was on the phone to the Fire Survivor Guidance Command Unit, they would have more pertinent information.
Right. And so, thinking that the fire was out of control by about 2 a.m., did you take any action on the basis of what you thought? Did you, in terms of the advice being given to callers?
Not at that point, no. As I say, we didn't know what the fire was, what the situation was in the building, and didn't want to start sending people out into possibly more toxic conditions.
Now, you told us a little bit about fire survival guidance calls and how generally one would stay on the call with the caller until they were rescued, and that didn't happen on the night, as we've seen. In terms of the decision or the discussion about stay put, once the decision to evacuate had been made,
Yeah.
and CROs had been told to pass that on in no uncertain terms to callers, were they told also to make sure they stay on the call with the callers to guide them out?
No, some people cleared their lines straight away as soon as they were given that. They were just going to basically run. I think some people did stay on the calls with people that were going down the stairs.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
there was no instruction with that at all.
Why is that?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Would it not have been important to ensure that, because you were giving, as it were, mobile fire survival guidance, helping, is that something that, well, let me ask, is it something that could have been done?
It could have been done, but it would have also meant that if we had stayed on the line with every single caller, that we wouldn't have been able to speak to any of the other callers and give that information to evacuate.
Well, you could only do at most 11.
Well,
at a time.
Actually, it was about 7 or 8 at that time with the amount of control officers that were available to do that.
So even more powerfully, so you could only handle 7 at a time. Yes.
Yeah.
Would it have been helpful to have more control room officers manning the phones, because you clearly had space for it?
Of course it would have been. Any more resources that we could have in the control room would have been extremely helpful, but that is our staffing level, and I don't know how many control officers would have worked. It would have been an awful lot. We'd have probably had to have about 30 people, to be honest with you. We were so inundated with information and calls.
Was there
of course it would, yes.
Was there any discussion, do you remember, on the night about whether to beef up the number of CROs?
Yes, so Jo had a conversation with Joanne about seeing if we can get some more staffing, which we've never done before either.
You had a conversation, did you?
Joanne and I had a conversation about it.
What was the upshot of that?
And that we would try and call people that were relatively near to Stratford Control and that weren't coming on duty the following day to see if they could come in and assist us.
And did they?
2 did, yes.
Who were they?
Kate Ranson and Pauline Warner.
Right.
Both AOMs.
At what stage in the night did they arrive?
I think Kate arrived about 4:15, 4:30.
Right.
Pauline a bit later. I'm not sure of the time completely.
But that was all, only 2?
Yeah.
Why no more?
Couldn't get hold of them.
Right.
I suppose they were asleep, their phones weren't switched on. Other people did call in, but later, about coming in to help with the day shift. But people we just left messages for people and things like that. So people did, when they started getting up, ring in to offer assistance.
Who was in charge of seeing if you could get more CROs into the control room?
I think Joanne spoke to Adam Crinion, and I think he was making those phone calls.
Right, okay. Now, and to your knowledge, did he stay at that task thoroughly and incessantly through the night, or did it come and go?
Oh, I think he tried anyone he thought would be available.
Okay. Now, in your supplemental statement, 5199, if I can just ask you to look at that, different topic, page 2, you say that halfway down that page, approximately 1:45, I answered a call on emergency services airwave channel, and you discuss that. And then you say, I informed them that I did not have access to the heli-tele downlink, which was very frustrating. And when asked, I could not confirm if any LFB command units on the scene had access. I later discovered that they did not have the access for some time. Now that's access to the heli-tele, is
Yes.
it? Okay. Did you know which command units didn't have access to the heli-tele?
I think it was CU8.
How did you find that out?
Somebody would have told me, but I don't recall who that was.
Right. Do you know how long CU8 didn't have access for?
No, I don't.
And you go on to say, as we've seen this before, this was very time-consuming.
Yes,
And
it
if
was.
we'd had access to the live images from the helicopter, would not necessarily have been required. How much time do you think was lost by having to pass on helicopter radio messages rather than seeing the live messages?
Through the night?
Yes.
Probably over an hour, I would imagine.
Right. And,
Especially early on, it was constant. It was just non-stop.
and did that? What effect do you think that had on other tasks that you could have been doing, or the other members of the control room staff could have been doing?
I could have assisted CROs with calls, tried to get more information about the calls and pass them on maybe quicker, but it's hard to say. There was so much going on in the control room that night. But I was answering that, and then I was answering the critical phone, literally one after the other.
Ms. Norman, thank you very much. I've got no further questions for you. In the usual way, there may be one or two that come out in the short break I'm going to ask the chairman to have. So
Okay.
I'm going to say thank you very much for the time being, and
Thank you.
well, we hope to be able to release you.
Yes, well, it does happen that council find there are more questions that need to be asked, so we're going to have a short break now,
Okay.
and then I'll ask you to come back and see if there are more questions to be answered.
Okay.
So could you leave us now? Don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room, please. And we'll resume at 20 to 3.
Okay, lovely.
All right?
Thank you.
We'd like to go with the usher, thank you. Uh, 20 to 3 then, please. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Millett, where are we?
Well, Mr. Chairman, there are, I think, 2 questions which I confess I should have asked and forgot to. So,
All right. Well, could we ask Mr. Norman to come back, please? Thank you very much. I think Mr. Millett has a couple of questions.
yes, I have 2 or so questions for you. The first is, we talked about the vision error earlier this morning, the difficulty with the vision system,
Yeah.
which led to an initial mobilisation of only 3 pumps as opposed to 4. Do you know whether that glitch, as it were, has been rectified since?
Yes, there's been a bit of work done on that. Yes, there has, yeah.
It has, okay. Were there any other difficulties that you recall on the night associated with the vision system?
No, it wasn't on the night, no.
Before Grenfell, did you ever have any reason to think or fear that crews would not successfully be able to rescue any FSG caller?
No, it's not something I've ever experienced, so no, I would always have the expectation that they would be able to rescue them, yes.
Right, okay. And then one more question, which I've been tempted into asking. Had you had full access to the heli-telly in the control room on the night from an early stage, which would obviously have been of the exterior of the building,
Yes.
do you think that would have assisted you and your team in the advice that you could give control room to callers?
We would have still felt that it was safer to keep people in their flats, only because we couldn't see, as you say, the interior. So we would have no idea what the fire was doing inside. But there would have been a lot more awareness of where the fire was affecting on the outside. So we would have known that it wasn't on the 4th floor. It was the entire top to bottom.
Right. And that then leads, I think, to the next and last question, which is, given that you needed information about what was happening inside the tower, did it ever occur to you to get onto CU8 or the incident commander and say, I need a full picture from you now as to what the conditions are like inside the building?
It did occur to me, yes, and to be honest, every time I thought about it a few times, but every time I went to do it, something else happened and I got taken away from what I wanted to do. As I say, we took more fire survival guidance calls that night than in the previous 10 years. So I was just trying to do too many things at once.
Ms. Norman, thank you very much. Those are all my questions.
Thank you.
So it just remains for me to say thank you very much for your patience in listening to and answering my questions. I'm extremely grateful to you for coming here and assisting us with our investigations.
Thank you.
There's a semaphore signal that I'm getting from Mr. Walsh. I'm not sure I understand.
Mr. Walsh, if you want to say something.
Yes, there was a question before you posed.
Oh, right.
Assuming you've taken the decision to ask.
I'm so sorry, Ms. Norman.
Have the occasional glitch here as well.
Is that technology, though? Is that technology?
I think if there is a burning,
I think.
if there is a real need for me to ask this question, and it's come from the source I think it could be dealt with in a different way. So.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Norman said, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr.
Thank
Walsh,
you.
but before you leave, Mr. Walsh, you're content with that, are you?
Well, I'm sorry to conduct a conversation so early. If it's capable of being dealt with in another way, I can't imagine which other way that might be. But I've got a witness here, that's all. But I'm interested in it.
No, I have no further questions for you, Ms. Norman. Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
Ms. Norman, thank you very much indeed for coming to give your evidence. It's been really very helpful to hear about how the control room was working on the night, and we're very grateful. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, and you're free to go now if you'd like to go with the usher.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to need, I think, a slight break for a scene change. before we
Right.
call the next witness, which is CRA Duddy.
Right. Well, I'll rise for as long as it's necessary to get things organised.
Yes, thank you
Perhaps
very
you'd
much.
ask the usher to get me as soon as you're ready.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Millett. No.
Mr. Chairman, can I call my next witness, please, which is Control Room Officer Peter Duddy.
Yes, thank you.
And repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
full truth,
and nothing but
and
the
nothing
truth.
but the truth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duddy. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Duddy, can I ask, please, for you to give the inquiry your full name?
Peter Kieran Duddy.
Right. And I want to say, first of all, thank you very much for coming to the inquiry to assist us with our investigations. We do very much appreciate it. My questions are supposed to be short and simple. Often they're not. If you want me to repeat them, I will do that. If you want me to put the question in a different way, I'm happy to do that. And if you need a break at any time, just signal.
Okay, you're actually a bit quiet here.
I'm sorry?
Struggling to hear you a bit there, sorry.
Oh, sorry. If you need a break at any time, just let me know.
Thank you.
Right. Now, can I take you to your witness statement, dated the 20th of October 2017? That's at MET *000 7787. Do you recognise that as your witness statement?
Yeah,
Have you read it recently?
I have that.
You have. And are the contents true?
Yes.
And have you discussed your evidence that in that statement or that you're about to give to the inquiry with anybody before coming here today?
No.
Right. You are a control room officer with the LFB, yes?
Yes.
And you've held that position, at least you had, as of October 2017, for about 2 years?
Yeah, just under 3 now.
Right. And was that when you were first employed by the LFB, 2015?
Yeah, September 15, yeah.
Right. And in terms of training, you say on page 2 of your statement, no need to go to it, that you've had about 9 weeks of training at the start. Is that right?
Yes, well, as I said, then it became a wee bit disjointed, so I ended up with 10 total.
Right. Were you trained on policy 790 FSG calls, current as at April 2014?
FSG calls, I believe we've done an afternoon session on it, yes.
Right. And were you trained on emergency call management policy 539?
Yes.
And were you trained on how to use the RIF, the reference information file for operators?
Yes, I was, yeah.
Okay. And are you familiar, can I take it you're familiar with Appendix 3 to policy 539, which is fire survival guidance?
Well, I couldn't say it word for word, but I'd be
Okay.
familiar, yes.
Did you ever receive any training on how to handle 999 calls from a high-rise fire?
Not specifically high-rise, but 999 calls, yes.
999 calls. And what was the last training session you attended prior to the Grenfell fire in June 2017?
Oh, in what regards to fire call handling, it would have
yes.
been initial training, initial entrance training.
Okay. Did you ever have any training on what advice to give or how to gather information when doing an FSG call?
Yes, during that day in training, yes.
But not after that?
Not since, no.
So did you never attend any refresher training?
I haven't, no.
No. And were you ever trained in how to draw all information together from an FSG caller or a 999 caller when deciding how to give advice?
Yeah, well, the questions that we asked would have been something that we were trained on, yeah. The questions we should ask would have been something we'd been trained on, yeah.
Okay. Were you ever trained specifically on how to assess the safety of exit routes when a caller said that they were affected by heat, smoke or fire?
Well, we would have been trained more if the caller says they can't get out. We wouldn't have had specific training on going through assessing whether there's 3 or 4 possible different exit routes, no.
Right. Were you ever given any specific training on how to communicate with a caller who had who didn't have English as their first language?
We would have been trained on, or well, we have a riff on setting up a language line if it's not their first language. Not specifically trained on how to deal with that, but there is a riff there available if we want to set up language line.
Did your training on FSGs ever factor in how to speak with people from different cultures or different ethnic or religious backgrounds?
No.
Did your training ever cover how to obtain information from callers about whether any persons in the flat or house or whether the caller had any disabilities, any mobility issues or health problems?
No, it's not a particular question would have been trained on to ask, no.
Right. Now, can I then turn to the stay put policy? In your statement on page 2, halfway down, you say, in essence, an FSG call is to give advice for as long as necessary to keep someone alive before crews get to them. And then, about halfway down the page, you say, general advice for high-rise buildings is to stay put in the flats as the fire should be contained within the flat as it's in. It is in. That is, if all the doors and windows are closed. If there is smoke, we would advise the caller to leave. So if there is smoke, we would advise the caller to leave. Is that advice, that general advice you give to any caller from elsewhere in a building, and particularly a high-rise building, if you know the fire is contained within the flat of origin?
Yeah, that's advice we give, yeah.
What advice do you give if you don't know whether the fire is contained within the flat of origin?
I suppose we would give the same advice, assuming that it is. If we were told that it wasn't contained, then I don't know, I suppose that'd be seeking advice from somebody in charge of what we're going to tell.
Does that mean that you would find out from elsewhere within the control room, perhaps a senior officer, more accurately what the conditions were in the building?
If possible.
Right. If you knew that the fire had spread beyond the flat of origin, but you didn't know how far, what would you do then?
We would probably be given the same advice, stay put. I would
stay put. Right. Now, I focused with you a moment ago on the sentence that says, if there is smoke, we would advise the caller to leave. Where would the smoke need to be before you would advise the caller to leave?
Affecting their individual flat.
When you say affecting, can you tell us what you think you mean by that?
Well, as we said earlier, if their flat's affected by fire, heat or smoke, if it's in their flat.
If it's in their flat?
Yeah.
Right, so smoke in the flat, that means affected, does it, in your mind?
Yeah, if it's continuing to come on, yeah, even after tiles and stuff have been put around cracks and doors.
Right. As a CRO, can I just ask you, what information would you have used as at the date of the fire, June 17, to make your own assessment of as to whether the flat is affected by smoke, heat or fire?
Well, depends on what the caller would have told us.
Right. So you get the information from the caller. Would you also seek to get information from the incident ground as well as the caller in making that assessment?
We wouldn't necessarily seek information from incident ground. If information was there, we would use it.
How often would you expect messages to come from the incident ground about the conditions on the outside or the inside of the building?
I believe at 8 pumps and above is 60 minutes per informative. I could be wrong on that, but I believe that's what it is.
Right.
Per informative message.
So you'd be relying on informative messages to come from the fire ground at particular points. Would you yourself go out and look for information specifically in order to work out what was happening on the incident ground so that you could advise callers as to what to do?
Not as a call handler. If you're on the radio and you're the one taking the informative messages, if you know you haven't had one in a while, you might prompt the ICP for an informative message to be sent, or if somebody senior requests for you to ask or to prompt for an informative.
Right. Did you seek to do that on the night of the fire?
I wasn't
itself?
on the radio, no. So
just by radio, is it?
It would just be the radio operator that would be taking informative messages, yes.
When you make your assessment about whether it's safe for a caller to stay in their flat, were you ever trained to use information that you had which was from elsewhere in the control room, but not from the caller themselves?
I don't believe it was specific training we would have had, but
right.
We would use any information available at the time.
So the answer is you would, but not as a matter of training, but as a matter of practice and experience?
Basically, yeah.
How would you go about getting information about an incident from other control room officers?
Well, you wouldn't be able to walk over them. Usually, if you're on the line, you could shout over to them, or if somebody in charge was coming around passing on information.
Moving on to fire survival guidance, at the foot of page 2 of your statement, you say, "I've never had any dealings with Grenfell Tower before, nor had I dealt with multiple FSGs within a high-rise. I have dealt with a couple of FSGs before, but they were for houses and both were resulted satisfactorily." Were those two separate incidents, or were they a case of multiple FSG calls from the same incident?
No, they were two separate incidents.
Okay. So before the night of Grenfell, had you ever handled multiple FSG calls from a single incident?
Not before, but did a few nights after.
Right. Now, on page 2 of your statement, above where we've just been looking, 4 lines down from the start of the second main paragraph, you say that an FSG is to give advice for as long as necessary to keep someone alive before the crews get to them. At the same time, there's a need to transfer as much information to the crews as possible. This would include, you say, this information would include the type of fire, its location, and the type of building, and where the residents are, so that the crews can rescue them. The crucial element to the classification of an FSG is whether or not the caller cannot get out. If they say they cannot get out, it is an FSG call. That's very clear. But can I just look at one or two paragraphs in the policies? Policy 790, first of all. Can I ask you to look at paragraph 2.3? Paragraph 2 is fire survival guidance call information. And 2.3 says, responsibility rests with control to determine that FSG is taking place and not the fire ground. The fire ground will determine whether an incident should be treated as persons reported, not control. Now, just focusing on the first sentence of that, responsibility rests with control to determine that FSG is taking place. How does control, or you as a CRO, make that determination?
Well, if they say they have no way out of their flat that's affected by fire, heat or smoke.
Right. Do you ever explore, when you make that assessment, do you ever explore with the caller whether it's really right that they can't get out, or do you just take them at their word?
No, well, you would take them at their word that what they're saying is correct. You would ask them if you, like, obviously in a high rise there's not going to be a back door, but say if it was a normal house, you say back door, bedroom window, any other way. But you do take them at their word, yeah.
I mean, would you not then ask them about what the means of escape were and what the conditions in the escape route were, so as to be able to make your own assessment as to whether actually they could get out? Or would you just simply leave it to the
Yeah, well, that would be one of the questions you would ask when they say they can't get out.
Yeah.
What's stopping you? If it's a fire at their front door, they can't get out, or if it's the stairwell that they can't get down. That would be one of the questions you would ask to determine if it's FSG or not.
So would you then, does it follow from that you as a CRO would actually seek to satisfy yourself from what the caller had observed and told you, that actually there was no way out, or in fact there was?
Well, we can only go off what they tell us.
Yes, you can only go on what they tell you, but would the assessment be made by you, or would the assessment be made by the caller?
Well, the assessment will be made by us based on what they say, yes.
Okay. And in order to make that assessment, I think you're telling us you would explore a bit with them as to precisely what the problem was. Smoke density, egress, things like that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Now, paragraph 3.1, it refers to principles of escape, assess, protect and rescue, as set out in policy 539. I can take you to that. You put 790 away and go to 539. You'll find that at tab 3 of our bundle. Can I ask you please to look at page 16, which is appendix 3. And we can see the 4 principles. In fact, there are 5 principles actually set out at the bottom. There's escape, assess, protect, reassess and rescue. Rescue is over the page. On that page, under the first principle of escape, if we look at that, it says control room officers will, or just above it, I'm so sorry, it says control room officers will always use the 4 principles of escape, assess, protect and rescue to provide guidance to these callers. Firstly, by assisting the caller to help identify a safe alternative escape route for them to leave their premises. If this is not possible, then assess the situation by asking the caller direct questions. So the first thing to do is to assess the safety of an alternative escape route. You've told us a bit about that. Would you expect to have plans of the building available to you in the control room in order to assist you with that assessment?
No.
You wouldn't?
No, it's not something we have, no.
Other than information provided to you by the caller, what else would you have to be able to make your assessment?
You just have what they're saying.
Right. And then it goes on, in terms of assessment, which is the next thing, you assess the situation by asking the caller direct questions, and you can see what those are. But I think you're also, is it right that you're also asking the caller direct questions when assessing whether there's a safe alternative escape?
Yeah, we would ask questions.
It's a dialogue.
Yes.
Is that right? And then you go on to the protect phase, just below that. It says, begin to protect the caller by providing the current fire safety advice to attempt to keep the caller safe. Does that mean, to your understanding, that you're giving the caller advice on how to protect themselves from the fire or smoke?
Yes.
Or heat?
Yes, correct.
And then it says you reassure the caller and reassess the caller's situation. A couple of questions on that. In terms of reassuring the caller, is the idea here to reassure them based on facts known to you and of which you're confident?
Yeah, well, it's to reassure the caller that there are crews on the way to get them, that they know where they are and that they're going to come for them.
And when you say that the crews are on their way, would you ever say that where you weren't completely confident that that was the case?
Well, we would assume that is the case. Usually when we take FSG calls, it's from the initial call, so that we would be mobilising as well as taking the FSG, so the crews are more often than not on the road to the incident.
Right.
Obviously at Grenfell we had a lot coming in after crews were already in attendance, and we were passing it to the command unit. But then we would assume that once we pass that information, it's being dealt with, and that there is a plan in place to get these people.
Would you ever give reassurances to callers knowing that the reassurance had no basis, such as telling callers that crews were coming when you knew or suspected that they weren't?
That's not something I've ever been in the position of.
Right.
No.
Okay. Now, can I just ask you to go back, I'm sorry to dot around, to go back to policy 790, tab 5, and go please to paragraph 5.1. Information transfer to the incident. And it says there, as soon as control has confirmed an FSG call is in progress, they will contact the incident ground and start to pass over the initial details. And then if you look on at paragraph 5.5, you can see that control will attempt to gather, this is over the page, 5.5, control will attempt to gather all the information on the control information form and relay this information to the incident as and when it becomes available. And there's a list there, you can see some 8 bullet points on the page. Just looking at that list, is it important for a CRO like yourself to obtain this information as soon as you can from every 999 caller?
Yeah.
And how easy is that, in your experience of, your limited experience of FSG calls pre-Grenfell, to obtain that information, all that information?
It depends on the caller and how calm they are. If they're panicked, it can be difficult to get information.
And have you had personal experience of obtaining that information and then passing it to the incident ground?
Yes.
How would you have passed it to the incident ground as part, in your experience pre-Grenfell? How would it be done?
Well, we have the riff that would come up that would prompt you and show you the questions. We would usually put that into either a service request that would be sent over the radio, or we would have an AOM or another CRO that would be plugged in listening to us. Right. And as we're talking and asking the questions, they would tell the radio operator, who would then pass it the crews on the way. Right.
And just looking at the list of things that you have to obtain and pass over to the incident ground, you've got the number of the flat, the number of persons involved, and also things like condition of their location, for example, heavy smoke or slight smoke, and latest advice given by control. So were you alive or aware of the need to get that information from all callers who called into the control room?
Yeah, we'd be aware of getting that information,
right. Is there any particular reason in general why you wouldn't seek to go down that shopping list and get all that information from the caller?
I can't say there would be any specific reason you wouldn't do it, no.
Right. And would you expect to be updated by the incident ground on the progress of each individual rescue?
They usually would in the way of informatives, yeah.
By way of informatives? Right. And in your experience before Grenfell, had you ever had a situation where you had to chase or you didn't have the informative message about the progress of a rescue?
Well, no, on my previous ones I was on the phone with them to the point of rescue.
Right.
So I believe the firefighters came on the phone to me and said we got them, so I knew that way. But an informative message would still have followed later.
And is that because it's normal to stay on a call, which is a fire survival guidance call, properly so called?
Yeah, it would be normal, yeah.
Would you be expected to be told the outcome of an FSG call or crew deployment, or would you get that because you were on the phone until rescue?
Well, you would, if you're on the phone until the point of rescue, you would know, but you would expect it in an informative, yeah. They would usually say the flat number and then rescued in their condition.
Right. Now, going to the night of the call, do you remember receiving an informative message at about 1:16 about the fire early on in its development?
No, I don't remember receiving the informative, no.
Well, we'll move ahead. Do you remember being aware that the fire at Grenfell had escalated, or was escalating very rapidly through pump numbers 10, 15, 20, 25?
Yeah, I was aware that the makeups were coming in, yeah.
When it reached pump 25, which it did at 1:31:55, did you have any particular thoughts yourself about the nature of the fire spread or smoke spread at the scene?
It was the biggest fire, or biggest pump attendance that I've been working for, so I thought that was a bad fire, yeah.
Right. And did you get an impression that the fire was spreading?
No.
You didn't?
I didn't.
What did you think was causing the rapid acceleration of make-ups in this way?
I didn't think what would have been caused. I thought maybe one floor above, but I wasn't thinking of how far it actually had spread.
Did it occur to you that compartmentation had been breached in the original flat where the fire started and was starting to spread through the building?
I was aware that it may have done, though I didn't have any confirmation and didn't have any information of how far. I was aware of the possibility, but didn't have confirmation. Right.
Now, we know, because we've seen it, that you were on calls from before this time, before pumps were made 25. Did the accelerating makeup that you could see affect the advice that you were giving callers?
No.
Why is that?
We would stick with the advice we're trying to do unless we were told otherwise, which we were later on in the night.
I see. Did you or any of your colleagues think that because the make-up to 25 had been so rapid, in about 30 minutes or so, that you needed information from the incident ground as to exactly what was happening at the scene, so as to be able to give more targeted advice to callers?
I can't say it's a thought that I was going to go out and look for information. If the information come on, we would have been made aware of it.
Right. Did you have any thoughts about whether it was wise to continue to tell residents to stay put, given just what you could see about the acceleration of the make-ups?
No.
Now, you started taking 999 calls. Before we look at some of those specifically, at the start of your getting calls, how did you go about recording the information that you received from the callers?
Would have been on our vision system.
On vision, so you typed it in, is that right?
Yeah.
Would you have written it down on a piece of paper?
At some points we would have done, but not the initial calls.
Right. And when you've typed it into vision, what would happen to it? Would it be sent to anybody else in the control room?
No, it would be, we would create it as excuse me, we would create it as a dupe of the first attendance.
Right.
To say that we've had more than one call to the same incident.
Right. Can I ask you to look at the short incident log and go to page 18? you'll see that on that page halfway down, just below the reference to aerial ladder makeup at 1:31:21, there's a time mark of 01:31:38. PD, service request created RT4G271, further call to save fire on 20th floor, also people trapped. I think this is the first entry on the short incident log for a 999 call, or FSG actually, because people are trapped. Do you remember what would happen with that? You may create a service request, and what do you then do with the service request?
We would put it on, on our middle screen, on the top right-hand corner, is where all service requests would go. So I would shout over to the radio operator that there's a message on RT4, and then they would pick it up from the same box in the right-hand corner and pass it to the scene.
And who would pass it to the scene? The radio operator?
The radio operator to the ACP, yeah.
Right. And would you know from the vision system that service request had been passed to the incident ground by radio?
Yeah, whenever it's put on the screen, the person on the radio can change the status on it to in progress and then complete it.
Right.
Plus you can also hear them.
And then we've just looked at the one at 1:31:38. If you look at the one at 1:34:11, just a bit lower down the page, service request updated from RT4. Further call to save fire on 20th floor. This is you again, PD. Also, people trapped at RT4 to G271. Further call to save fire on 20th floor, flat 82. Also, people trapped. What are the circumstances in which you do a service request update like that?
If you receive further information on the same basis.
Right.
If I was listening to her and knew she hadn't passed the message yet, I could add on to the message and make her aware that it's been updated.
I see. I've just taken those two. They're clearly service requests. Do they reflect calls that you had just received?
Yeah,
just taken.
Done, yeah.
Right. And would you ever enter a service request in relation to a call that some other CRO had taken?
Not unless I was asked to for some reason.
How soon after the call did you enter the information on the vision log as a service request?
Well, if you're not doing it as you're on the call, it would be done immediately afterwards.
Right. You say it would be done. Was that your invariable practice on the night?
That's what we would generally do, yeah.
Is what you generally do, but was that your invariable practice on the night?
Yeah, it would have been.
Now, at page 3 of your statement in paragraph 2, you say that the first FSG I remember taking, and this is, or dealing with, this is 5 lines down from the start. The first FSG I remember dealing with was a family that were on the 12th floor. I advised them to stay put as per normal, but then they said that the fire was in the flat next door to them. My initial thought was that they must have been panicking and had seen some smoke. This is not uncommon with fires, and people naturally assume the moment that they see smoke that the fire is with them, when in reality that is not the case, and it is actually some distance away. Now, I'll just ask you just about timing of that, first of all. That call is... well, help me with this. If you look at the time mark, the time mark of 01:45:44 on the short incident log at page 19, 01:45:44. I'm so sorry. It says service request created, further fire started on 12th floor, flat 96. First of all, is that, I should ask you, I've put these two to you, but is that the call you're referring to?
Yeah, I think it would be, yeah.
And now we see that you've recorded that in the vision system at 01:45:44. The call itself is LFB 324, which starts, we don't need to go to it straight away, but it starts at 01:44:33. So it looks as if from that you entered it straight away afterwards. Would that be right?
Yeah, looks like it, yeah.
But let me try and be a bit more helpful to you than I'm being, I'm afraid. If you look at, if you could be shown please, the control room report, LFB 4790. At a time mark of 1:44:43, this is page 46. This looks like it's the call. It's flat 95, 12th floor. And the summary is there. It starts at 1:44:43. It finishes, well, it lasts, as you can see, call duration 3 minutes, 33 seconds. So sometime at 01:48, it finishes. And we go back to page 19 of the short incident log, we can see you entering the service request for that flat at 01:45. Do we get from that in fact you were on the call while entering the message?
Must have been, yeah.
Right. Do you remember a system involving whiteboards on the night?
Yeah, they were directly behind me, probably closer than me and the chairman. They were directly behind me.
What were they for? Do you remember?
It was two station managers were recording information on FSGs.
Did anybody tell you to start sending messages to the officers operating the whiteboard?
I imagine at some point somebody would have done, but I can't recall somebody specifically directing us to do that, no.
And we've heard some evidence about the whiteboard and about Jason Oliffe being present in the control room and using his mobile to speak to the command unit. My question is, while that was happening, did you yourself pass any further messages to the radio operator to send by radio?
Probably whenever the whiteboards were set up and Jason Oliffe and the other station manager, Paul McClanahan,
Right.
I was passing a lot of information just directly to them. As they were close by, it was quicker and easier.
Now, we looked at the question of how you got information in light of the developing picture. I'd like now to look at some information you were also receiving from specific phone calls from those outside and inside the tower. Can I start by asking you to look, please, first of all, at the control report at page 13. And I want you to look at 1:24:08. This is where you take a call from a female caller reporting a fire in Grenfell Tower. The caller reports there's a line of fire going right up the outside of it. CRO Duddy informs the caller that the brigade is in attendance and additional resources are on their way. Do you remember that call?
No.
When you were told by this caller at this time, 1:24, that there was a line of fire going right up the outside of it, did you have any thoughts about fire spread, breach of compartmentation, or what the fire was doing?
Not specifically. Quite a lot of time the information you get from callers can be inaccurate. It can be, sometimes the smoke can look worse. The smoke could be going up, it's not actually the fire.
Right.
So it would have recorded it as a duplicate call, but I wouldn't have thought specifically on the way a fire spread that it did, yeah.
Did you report what you were being told by this caller to anybody in the control room or anybody?
Not that I recall. It would be very difficult to report every call that every control room officer took to an AOM or operations manager. We wouldn't routinely report every call to them.
No. Did you try? Did you seek to pass this information on to Alex Norman?
Oh, I don't recall taking the call, so I'm not sure if I passed it on.
Fair enough. At that point, 1:24:08 or so, had you heard any other calls in progress in the control room?
Yeah, I was aware that there was a lot of calls going on, and we were all heavily involved in call taking.
Yes. And we can see from the two previous calls higher up that page that 1:22:16, Christine Howson had taken a call, and a minute later, Debbie Rail had taken a call. That on that occasion from Thames Water. Could you hear what was going on around you in the control room at about this point?
You couldn't hear clearly every word that was being said, but you could pick up on some things, yeah.
Right.
Particularly people who were closest to you.
Who was closest to you?
Well, it would have been Sharon on the radio.
Right. And who else? Show the control room operators.
I can't recall where everybody was sitting that night, so
Okay.
I can't remember.
Moving on then to page 17, you receive a call at 1:26:54, which is transferred to you from the BT operator in Nottingham. A female caller comes on the line and reports that there is a fire in flat 186 Grenfell Tower. You see that?
Yeah.
And she says there is a fire in the whole building. And when you ask if the caller is in the building, she confirms that everyone is out. The caller is advised to stay out, not to go back in, and there are a lot of fire engines already there. Do you have any recollection of that call?
No.
Did you know at that stage what floor flat 186 was on?
No.
Did you have any thoughts at that stage about how the fire might have spread from the fourth floor to flat 186?
No, I don't. No.
Did you have any thoughts about what the speed of makeups by this point was telling you about the speed of spread of this fire?
No, I didn't think directly on the spread of fire. I was more focusing on each individual call as it came at me.
Right. Then turning on to page 21, you can see at 1:28:26, you receive a call. This is just 2 minutes later from flat 82 on the 11th floor. The female caller explains that she's stuck on the 11th floor and does not know how to get out. CRO Duddy asks if there is any smoke in her property, to which the caller states that there is no smoke in her property, but that there is smoke in the landing. CRO Duddy advises her to keep the doors and windows closed. Now, again, do you remember this particular call or not?
There's very few calls I remember from that night, to be perfectly honest with you. I couldn't tell you how many I took. So.
Now, she told you that she was stuck on the 11th floor. Can I just look at the transcript with you? It's 307, LFB 307. And it starts, page 2. You can see the time of the call, 01:28:26, and at the top of page 2, fire brigade, yeah, hi, I live at 82 Grenfell Tower, there's a fire, you're in attendance, but I'm stuck on the 11th floor and I don't know how to get out. And then you go, right, is there any smoke coming onto your property? Not at the moment, but if I open the door, there's smoke on the landing. There's smoke on the landing, okay, what floor are you on? And then you give some advice, keep the door closed, keep the smoke out. Just pausing there, is there any reason why you didn't ask her why she was stuck on the 11th, or she thought she was stuck on the 11th floor?
Well, I assume she would have said she was stuck on the 11th floor if there was smoke on the landing.
Right.
But she didn't say the smoke was coming into her flat, so her flat was not directly involved.
We don't, in this call, but well, let's look at the rest of it. You go on to say, sure, there's smoke on the landing, okay, what floor are you on? I'm on the 11th. You're on the 11th, okay, right, just keep your door. Yeah, it's on, closed, yeah, it's shut, but I've got to keep your door closed, keep the smoke out of your property, okay, yeah, okay. What flat number are you at? 82, I think the fire's like on the 5th or 6th floor. Like, I can see it out of the window. but obviously you know where it is. But yeah, I just don't know how to get out, to be honest. And you say, right, I'll let the crews know where you are, okay. On 82, yeah, the 11th floor, yeah, okay, all right. All right, thank you. So keep the doors closed, okay, keep your windows closed, cover up any smoke, okay. Oh yeah, right, cool, thanks. And then the call ends with the caller saying, all right, cheers, thanks, bye. We don't see you exploring with the caller in that call as to how she might have been able to get out of the flat. She just says, I'm stuck, and you take that at face value, it seems. Is there a reason why that is?
She also said there was no smoke on her property. So
right.
Her property wasn't directly involved in the fire, based on what was said there.
Okay. Now, you can see at the end, because I read it to you, you say, I'll let the crews know where you are, okay. Did you, do you think?
If I said it, that I would have done so, yeah.
Right. How would you have done that?
Could have been a service request, or else writing it down, piece of paper, and passing it. I remember Yvonne Adams was going around collecting pieces of paper at that stage
right.
of levels and flat numbers, and then she was passing it all as one group to the scene.
Right. Just to go back to this question of not exploring her statement, I'm stuck. She tells you there's smoke on the landing, but we don't see you saying, well, all right, but how thick is it? How dark is it? Is there a neutral plane, or can you crawl across the landing? Is there a reason why you didn't explore the conditions on the landing with her?
Can't think of any particular reason other than she said her flat was unaffected.
Her flat was unaffected, but
yeah,
she said she was stuck. So thinking of the policy that we looked at earlier, which is that you have to assess whether or not there's an alternative safe means of escape. My question is there a reason why you didn't make that assessment of precisely the conditions in the escape route with
No,
the
I can't think of any reason why not.
Right. You then receive a call at exactly 1:30, and this is page 23 of the control report. And it's summarised there. You take a call from a female caller reporting there's a fire in Grenfell Tower and they're stuck on the top floor. The doors won't open. The caller explains that there is smoke everywhere and the fire is in her house on the 22nd floor. She tells you that everyone is now on the 23rd floor. The caller further explains that the fire has broken into the kitchen of her flat and that she has run into the neighbour's flat. FSG is given to explain how to try to prevent smoke from coming in. The line is very poor and keeps cutting out. I don't think I need the rest to read out aloud. We can see it there. Again, do you have a particular recollection of this call?
No.
Okay. Did you have any thoughts when you got this call and were told that the fire is in her house on the 22nd floor? Did you have any thoughts about how it had got there from the 4th floor?
Well, probably would have been assuming at that stage it must have been
Right.
quite a bit of fire spread if what she was saying was correct. Yeah, I would have thought it spread quickly.
So by now, is it right that by now, on this information, the fire was not only on the 4th floor but had spread all the way up to the top of the building?
Well, based on that, but it's also possible for burning embers to come up and catch a curtain or something, which doesn't directly mean that the whole side of that building
Right.
is alight.
Now, let's look at the transcript if we can. It's LFB 310. And we can see the call starts 3 lines down with the caller saying, we're all stuck on the top floor, the doors are not open. And that's repeated. And then you say, right, is there any smoke where you are? And you say, well, the whole place, inaudible smoke. Is there any smoke where you are now? Yes, there's smoke everywhere. You need to get right to the top. The fire's in our house and I'm on the 22nd floor. Everyone's on the 23rd. And then you say, okay, the fire's on the 5th floor, so you're well away from the fire, okay? No, it's not. It's in our flat. We ran out of our flat. It's broken into our kitchen. Right, is there a fire on your floor or is it smoke? Yes, exclamation mark, there's a fire. There's a fire on the 20th floor as well. Inaudible. Okay, right. So now, just pausing there, is there a reason why, when you were told the fire was on the 22nd floor, you corrected the caller to say it's on the 5th floor, and then had a little bit of an argument with the caller about where the fire was?
Well, quite often that they do believe in the upper floors that the fire's with them if they see the smoke. At that point, we still believed the fire was on the 4th, so I wasn't aware that it had spread there.
Except that you had been told, because we looked at these calls earlier, that there was a fire on at flat 186, and there was a line of fire up the whole building. So in the light of those earlier calls, I'm just wondering with you really why you thought it right to correct the caller and say the fire was on the 5th floor.
Well, because that was still the information that we were given. We had no confirmation that the fire had spread. As I said earlier, sometimes information you get is inaccurate.
Yeah, I just wonder if that's really right, though, given that at 126.54 you were told that a flat at 186 was affected by fire, and flat 82 on the 11th floor was affected by fire too, or by smoke on the landing at least. It was clear by that stage, I'm suggesting to you, that it was entirely possible that the fire had got all the way up to the top. So my question, do you accept that?
I accept it's possible, but it's just not something that we had confirmed.
Okay.
Accept it's possible, but we don't know for definite.
Moving on with the call, you go on page 3 to investigate with the caller whether they can keep the smoke out. I think I'm summarising it there. And then on page 4, after the hello, hello, you say, message on 4, possible on the something floor as well. Right, are you able to stop the coming into the flat? And then inaudible, hello, hello. We're going to get somebody to come up and help you. Okay, hello, 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 operator, is this line open? That's how it finishes. When you're, go back to the beginning of the call, when you're told that by the caller that they're all stuck on the top floor, is there a reason why you didn't investigate with them whether there was any safe route of exit at that point?
No, I can't think of any reason, no.
Now, we've looked at this transcript line by line, well, almost line by line. We can look at it again if you like, but you don't appear in this call to ask how many people are in the flat. You're told we're all, so there are a number of them, but you don't ask how many there are. Is there a reason for that?
I can only imagine it's something I would have been doing or planning on. Was getting more information at that stage, and then the call cut off. I can only imagine I would have been asking before or planning as the call got cut off.
Right.
I can't think specifically why not. No.
And you got cut off. Were you able to ring back and get that further information that you didn't get in the first part of the call?
I don't recall. If it was a landline, I wouldn't have called back.
Right. Was there any reason why you didn't seek to establish whether there were any children in that flat, or whether there were people with mobility difficulties or elderly people?
No.
Did you inform Alex Norman, as the then senior operations manager in the control room, that you had discovered that there was serious smoke spread as far as the top floor, trapping occupants up there?
As you say, when I shouted out message on 4, I would have passed it to the scene. I don't remember specifically speaking to Alex or the AOMs. I remember speaking to them about something at some point, but I can't remember which one I spoke to or which particular call it was. So I can't clarify that I definitely spoke with them on this call, no.
Would it have been important to you, having discovered that there was fire on the 20th floor, and in fact fire on the 22nd floor, as you were told on this call, to tell Alex Norman that the fire had got that far up?
Would have told somebody, I would imagine, but I can't recall it. I remember speaking with somebody about fire spread, but I can't remember who it was and which particular call it was.
Right. Was anybody at this stage supervising your calls to ensure that the advice that you were giving and the information you were eliciting from the caller was correct or appropriate?
I don't recall if it was at that time. I'm not sure of timing at all, sorry.
Right. Now, I'm going to jump over a few of the other calls that you received. I want to look at a specific one, if I can, with you. At 1:34:50, and it may be that now may be an appropriate moment to have a break if you want to.
Aye, that's grand, aye, thanks.
Would you like to have a break now?
Aye, please.
Yes, I think we might all benefit from that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, all right, we'll have a break now. Please don't talk about your evidence or anything relating to anyone during the break. And now, Mr. Millett, we better keep this to 5 minutes.
I think we'll have to, yes.
Okay.
So leave us now and go with the usher, please, and come back to start at 10 to 4. All right, thank you very much. All right. Good, 10 to 4, please. Mr. Duddy there? Yes? Good, thank you. All right, Mr. Duddy, carry on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duddy. Thank you for coming back to us. I'm going to jump over a few calls. I just want to look at three particular ones and then move on. The first one is at page 30 of the control report, timed at 01:34:50, which is the transcript for which is at LFB 315. And this is a call from a lady who said she was trapped in flat 192 on the 22nd floor. Now, better to go from the transcript, I think. Can I ask you to be shown the transcript, which is LFB 315? And it starts, yeah, we're trapped in 192 Grenfell Tower. Yeah, we're actually there. Okay, what's that we do? We can't get down the stairs because the stairs is full of smoke. And then you go on, what floors are you on? Now, just at that stage, did you realise, either from this call or from other calls that you'd been receiving in the past 20 minutes or so, or 15 minutes or so, that there was only one staircase in Grenfell Tower?
Don't remember receiving that information, no.
Did there come a time when you did learn that there was only one staircase?
Afterwards. After a couple of days, maybe. At
some point in the night or after the night?
No, after the night. I don't remember receiving that information on the night. No.
Oh, really? Okay. So, did you receive any information about the fire safety protection measures within the building on the night itself?
Not that I remember, no.
So you didn't learn, would it follow from that you didn't learn anything about what the exit routes were?
Well, we would have just assumed, like any building, a staircase, but I don't remember receiving any specific information on Grenfell, no.
All right. Were any of the supervisors listening in on this call or helping you with what advice to give at this stage? Just to remind you, it's 01:34:50, so just about 25 to 2.
I would, unless they happened to be passing by, I would doubt it, no.
Now, given that what we've already looked at this afternoon from earlier calls, which we saw, about smoke and fire spread up the building, we looked at that call, 22nd floor fire in the flat there. Can you explain something? You go on to say, in the middle of the page, right, okay, the fire's on the 5th floor, so there could be some smoke coming up. You need to close your doors and windows, okay. Can you tell us why you told them that the fire was on the 5th floor when you had been told in the call at 1:30 that the fire was in a flat on the 22nd floor?
Well, by saying the 5th floor, I can only imagine I was thinking of the 4th. I don't know why I said 5th there, but no, I can't think why.
But even assuming we read 5th as 4th, is there any reason you can give us as to why you told these callers that the fire was on the 5th or 4th floor when 4 minutes before you'd started a call in which the caller had told you that the fire was on the 22nd floor?
No, I can't give any reason, no.
Now, you go on to say, and there's some discussion about where the smoke's coming from, in the middle of page 3, you say, okay, keep the smoke out of your flat, okay, we've got people coming up to you to the 22nd floor, okay. Did you know that for a fact?
Well, that's the assumption we would have made once we pass information to the scene, that there's a plan in place to go and get them, which there was,
right.
I believe.
But you didn't, does it follow from that you didn't actually have confirmation from the incident ground that crews were on their way to that, to the 22nd floor?
No, we didn't have confirmation, no.
So, and I'm sorry just to press this isn't intended to be critical, but what was the basis on which you were providing this caller with that reassurance that people were coming up to you?
On the basis that if we pass information that flat needs checked, that they'll go and do it.
On the basis that you had passed the message on already, or were about to?
Well, I can't remember if I had it passed at that stage or was going to, but it would have been passed and that it would have been dealt with. That would have been the assumption.
Right. And just to go back to a point I've asked you about on other calls, when you're told they're trapped, and you're told we couldn't get down the stairs because the stairs is full of smoke, is there a reason why you didn't go on to ask them some detailed questions about smoke density in the stairs or the conditions in the lobby outside the flat, and how difficult it was actually to reach the stairs and get down them?
No, there's no specific reason. It would have just been taken at the word that the smoke was stopping them.
Right. Can I look at another call? It's control report, page 36. I think it's the next one you take. It's a call timed at 1:37:58. Which is, I think, the next call you take. And the summary says, a female saying, 113, hello. CRO Duddy responds with, hello, fire brigade. The caller sounds distressed and is speaking very quickly. A smoke alarm is sounding in the background, and the caller states that there is smoke coming through the letterbox. CRO Duddy confirms that she is calling from Grenfell Tower and asks which floor the caller is on, to which she replies the 14th. CRO Duddy advises the caller that the fire is on the 5th floor. The caller says that she doesn't know what to do and has a baby in the house. She explains that the occupants have tried to run out, but there is smoke in the corridor and the whole corridor is black, so they've run back into the house. She also explains to CRO Duddy that there is smoke coming through the door and filling up the whole of the house. CRO Duddy advises her to block up the doors to keep the smoke out. He says he will let the crews know where she is. Do you remember that call particularly?
No, I don't remember that particular call, no.
Do you remember noting that this was someone calling from flat 113?
No, I don't remember. Going back, I can't remember flat numbers I spoke to her, nothing. No.
Now, she'd given you quite a lot of information about the smoke in the corridor and how they tried to escape. Was that enough for you to be able to know confidently there wasn't an alternative escape route?
Yeah, ask that again, please.
Let me put it in a different way. Why, given the information that you were given, is there a reason why you didn't seek to explore with her more precisely what the smoke density was, what the conditions were like in the lobby or in the stairs?
I think we've just been taking the assumption that it was bad smoke and
Right.
just taking it as the word. Because keep in mind, there's probably 15, 20 calls that are waiting to get through this. So we're anxious to process as many calls as possible.
Now, you see that we can see from the summary that you told the caller that the fire was on the 5th floor. Again, and it's the same question. Can you help us understand why you told her that the fire was on the 5th floor when, as we've seen from the other calls, it had spread 2 floors higher in the building? 2 calls from 2 separate callers on floor 22 where there was fire.
No, I can't give a reason to that.
Right. Moving on, in the same report to page 46, this is a call at 1:44:43, and the transcript reference is LFB 324. Let's just look at the summary. You take a call from a male caller who says that he's stuck in flat 95 on the 12th floor and says he has 2 children. CRO Duddy explains that the fire is on the 4th floor, and the caller informs him that embers have come up and in the window and have started a fire in the kitchen of flat 96 next door. He also says there are other people trapped on the 11th floor. The caller reports that it's very smoky and asks for help. CRO Duddy informs the caller that crews will be sent up to him. CRO Duddy advises him to get to the room furthest from the fire. So that's the summary. Can I just ask you to look at the transcript, which, as I say, is at LFB 324, and have it there. And again, we see it starts, we're stuck in flat 95. okay, over speaking, please help us, I've got 2 children. And then you, a little bit lower down, after having asked for the floor 12, operator, the 12th, right, you're well away from the fire, that's on the 4th floor. Now, just pausing there. But by this time, you had, I think we've seen, a number of calls from callers who were telling you that the fire was not contained to the 4th floor, but had spread as far as at least the 22nd floor. And I'm sorry to repeat the question, but why did you tell this caller that she was well away from the fire, which was on the 4th floor?
I can't think why. I've just been going on the confirmation that,
Okay.
or it's something we had no confirmation from seeing that it was spread.
Now, again, you're told that she's stuck, and I'm sorry it's the same question, but she's stuck in the flat. We don't see you exploring what the conditions are in the exit route so as to be able to make an assessment of whether she could safely leave. Is there a reason for that?
No.
Just 1 or 2 other questions about different calls. I'm not going to go to the transcript of this one, but if you go to page 55 of the transcript, I'm so sorry, 55 of the report, the control report, you can see that you answer a call at 1:54:14 from a male caller in flat 95 on the 12th floor who says it's getting worse. And there's a summary there, and you can see that the call duration is 40 minutes. Do you remember this call in particular?
I remember that one because it was so long.
Yes.
And the fellow at the other end of the phone, I just remember he was incredibly calm somehow, which stood out just.
Is there a reason why you stayed on the line with that caller, but not with the others earlier that we've looked at?
See, I can't give particular reasons because I can't remember. There must have been something. I keep in mind just going off what people are saying to you. Like, it's easy to read off a transcript now, but you're just kind of making the best guess as people are screaming at you and shouting at you in the worst situation of their lives. You're just trying to make your best guess, I suppose.
And as we can, did you have a supervisor listening into that call at any point?
No, not that I recall.
Now, as you can see in the summary, it says 02:33:36, just 2/3 of the way down there. It says CRO Duddy says to the caller, right, we're going to tell you to leave, but you need to stay on the phone. Who is the we?
Well, I would assume that would be me telling them.
Okay. At that time, 2:33:36, do you know, can you remember whether the stay put advice had now changed?
I'm guessing it must have been around that time if I'm saying I'm going to tell you to leave.
Right. Do you remember whether at this time, by which I mean 02:33:36, you were getting any information back from the incident ground about the progress of the rescue? You've been on the call by that stage for about almost 40 minutes. So do you remember whether towards the end of the call you got any information back from the incident ground?
No, it was basically blind hope that there was
right.
somebody on the way to get them, yeah.
Did the fact that you weren't getting information back from the incident ground give you any further information yourself about what was happening to deployments and whether they were succeeding in getting into the tower?
No. I don't remember having that thought, no.
Right. Did you the experience of that 40-minute call assist you in giving advice to later callers?
Well, if that's the time we started 2:33, if that's the time we started changing, then that advice would have been consistent with next call, so I suppose yeah, it would have been.
Yes. Now let's pick up that theme, the change in the stay put advice. In your statement on page 4, if you could just go to that, in the second paragraph, you say, at about 2:40 a.m. everything changed. The advice we'd been giving to people was completely altered. And then you say, Senior Operations Manager Joanne Smith told me the change. She said we needed to tell people to get out and make their own way out. And then you go on to elaborate a little bit lower down the page. Before I get to that part, can I just ask you about that first sentence I read to you, about what the advice was? Do you remember exactly what Joe Smith said?
I can't remember the exact wording, it was just words to the effect of just telling them they have to get out.
Right.
Can't remember the exact wording or the exact time. But
Okay. Now, there's a control debrief note, which I don't want to take up time taking you to, but it says advice was to put wet towels over mouth, hold hands, stay together, get out, could be last chance. Does that trigger any recollection in your mind about the kind of advice you should be giving to people?
yeah, I believe that is something that say the callers, yeah.
Do you remember being told by Joe Smith to tell callers that it could be their last chance?
It was words to the effect of, yeah, that's basically that's the only chance they have, yeah.
Were you told that firefighters were having difficulty getting above a particular floor at this stage?
Don't remember receiving that information, though.
Were you told that firefighters were having difficulty in effecting any rescues due to the difficult conditions at this point?
Don't remember receiving that, no.
When you say that the advice was completely altered, as you do in the first line of that paragraph, does that mean that at no stage before that were you telling people to evacuate even if they could?
I don't remember saying that, no.
No. I mean, before the advice was changed, do you remember giving any advice to somebody saying, get out?
Not that I recall.
Right.
I certainly wouldn't have said to somebody it was their last chance before that, no.
No, but leaving aside the last chance point, did you remember before the advice was changed, yourself giving advice to callers to say, well, let's go, get out?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. Now, you then go on halfway down the paragraph to elaborate on what advice you were giving. You say, I remember, well, perhaps I should show you, to be fair to you, the line before, to be suddenly telling people that they needed to get out and get down the stairs was totally alien to us, and we were suddenly in an unprecedented place. I remember trying to tell people that what they needed to do, get wet towels around their faces, feel for the walls and make their way to the fire escape. A lot of people were simply too scared to leave and actually flatly refused to go. I was left pretty clueless as to what to do, so did the only thing I could think of that might get them to go. I tried to scare them. With nothing left to say, I told people that they had absolutely no other option than to go, and if they did not go, they would die in that flat. It was their only chance. It may seem pretty strong to have said that, but I was left with no choice, and the people on the end of the phone certainly had no choice. I think for some I managed to change their minds, and they made all efforts to get out, but I'm not sure if they made it out or not. Now, that advice, that tone of advice, did anybody tell you to use that tone, that uncompromising language like that?
I remember having a conversation along those lines with Joanne Smith, but I can't recall the exact wording of what we discussed. Right. But it was along those lines.
Right. What if people told you that they just couldn't leave? They tried everything, they just couldn't leave. What would you do then?
Well, I think in that case that there was probably no chance, as we were saying, that was the last chance.
Had you ever received any training? I think we covered this, but having looked at this precise advice, have you ever received any training on what to do if the stay put changed in the way it did on that night?
No.
You say that you felt pretty clueless. We've just looked at that.
Yeah.
Why did you feel clueless?
Well, maybe clueless would be better described as helpless.
Helpless, right. Did anything in your training or experience prepare you to handle this change of advice and now give this advice that Joe Smith had asked you to give?
No.
can I ask you to look at an example of one of these calls? It's page 96 of the control report. The call timed at 2:42:08. And this is you taking a call from a female caller. Flat 94, 12th floor. And I just want to pick up the advice you give at 2:50. Because it's a call that lasts 10 minutes and 49 seconds, but at 2:50 you say, this is 4 lines up from the bottom, if you don't do what I tell you, you are going to die in that flat. The caller says she will try. No more is heard from the caller, and the BT operator comes on the line and confirms the caller has cleared the line. The question is that the kind of approach that you took for the rest of the night?
Probably not on every call. I would have been, I suppose, a wee bit more diplomatic about it. But as you see, that call was 10 minutes. That was probably 10 minutes of convincing them in less a dramatic way of you have to try and get out. But at that stage, as I said earlier on, there's more calls queuing up that we still need to tell them the same thing. So it was just a case of that's what the reality of the situation was.
Right. Did you hear any other control room officers taking the same approach, or taking a different and more gentle approach?
Not that I recall. No.
Were the supervisors assisting you in any way as to how to couch the advice, or were you just left to decide for yourself how to put it?
They done the best they could to come around and encourage us and offer advice, but they had just a hell of a lot to do themselves, so they weren't constantly standing over our shoulder telling us what to do.
Did you or did anybody else that you know of try to take account of any cultural differences or ethnic differences which might affect the way the caller might respond to being advised in the way you were advising them?
No.
When the advice changed, were you still passing on the details of the callers to Jason Olive at the whiteboards so that he could inform the incident ground?
Yeah, I remember that we were still recording calls right up until I went home that morning, about 7:30 if anything came on. I remember somebody continued ringing in about a guy in the 8th, but we continually made a note of every flat and floor number that we spoke about.
There's a call at 3:08. I just want to take you to the summary at page 121 of the control report. Where you take a call from a caller who states, "Fire, fire," while coughing. The caller states that they're in flat 192 on the 12th floor. Sorry, flat 92 on the 12th floor, I'm sorry. And CRO Duddy advises the caller to get to the staircase, as it is their only chance. There is one adult and 2 children. And the call is a long call. And I'm glad to say that it ends well. Do you have a particular recollection of that call?
I listened to that call last week, yeah.
And you stayed on the line through that call and helped them out?
Until they were on the staircase, from what I remember, yeah. Not the whole way down the outside, but until they were on the staircase. I think they may have made contact with crews on the staircase.
Is that a good example of the successful efforts that you yourself took on the night to rescue people?
It's about as much as we could do, yeah.
I've got 1 or 2 questions about callbacks. Joe Smith gave some evidence that control rooms don't, as a matter of callers back. Is that your experience?
Not a landline. If they're on their way out and you ring the landline, they hear their phone ring, dangerous, they might go back and they pick it up.
Right.
But at mobile, if that's on their person, then we would call back on mobile.
After the advice to stay put changed, did you call people back when calls were dropped or they ended to tell them that the advice had changed?
Not that I remember doing so now. It would have been very difficult to find the calls.
Did you ask anybody how callers were going to find out that the advice had changed if you didn't call them back?
No.
Is there a reason for that?
I think we're just so focused on calls coming in.
Right. Now, there is an example of a callback, and I just wanted to know why that was. It's a call from flat 153 on the 18th floor, where the call had come from the control room at Essex. Do you remember that?
I only remember it from it being mentioned in this inquiry before the summer. I don't remember it from the night, no.
Right. Do you remember calling anybody else back on the
No.
night? So it was a one-off, was it, as well? You don't remember?
I don't recall calling anybody, but
Right.
based on what you said, I must have done, yeah.
Okay. Let me see how much you do remember. Do you remember speaking at about 3 a.m. to the Essex control room?
No.
You don't. Do you remember being told about to call a man in flat 153 and being given the number to call?
No, I don't remember. I only know of it through it being mentioned in this inquiry. I don't remember it from the night, no.
Right. Moving on to a final topic. On page 5 of your statement, you say in the second paragraph that halfway through, throughout the night there were no TVs on in the control room. However, at some point I remember being shown images of the building on someone's phone, on Sky News or something. To me, it looked like something from a film, a disaster movie or something. I could not believe that it was real, and it was actually happening there and then. I'm utterly amazed that firefighters managed to get up there and get anybody out. Do you remember at what point of the night you saw images of the building on someone's phone?
It would have been as the call starting to quieten down.
Right.
Previous to that, I wouldn't have had a chance to look at anything.
If you had seen pictures of the tower on fire at an earlier stage, would that have assisted you in terms of the advice that you were giving to callers, do you think?
Wouldn't have assisted in the advice because it's not my decision to make. To change the advice, so I don't believe it would have assisted me personally, no.
No. But would it have assisted you in getting a clearer picture in your mind as to smoke and fire spread, and so that you could give callers clearer, more fact-based advice yourself?
It may have done. I can't say for definite, but...
Fair enough. Mr. Duddy, I'm going to say thank you very much for your evidence. I have no further questions at the moment. There may be one or two more that occur to me. So I'm going to ask the Chairman to rise for a few minutes, just to make sure I've covered them all. Mr. Chairman, is that convenient?
Yes, well, it does happen, Mr. Duddy, that on reflection, Council finds questions that should have been asked. So we'll have a break now until 4:30, and I'll just ask you not to talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room.
Yep, grand, thank you.
And then when you come back, we'll see whether there are any more questions, all right?
Yeah, thank you.
Would you like to go with the usher then, please? Right, 4:30 then, please.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Millett.
Grateful for the break. We won't be long, I don't think. There are a number of questions I have to ask.
Yes, I thought there
But
would
they're
be.
not voluminous.
Could we have Mr. Duddy back then, please? All right, Mr. Duddy, a few more questions, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Mr. Duddy, first of all, I put a call to you from page 96 of the control report at 2:42:08 from a female caller, flat 94 on the 12th floor. I've been asked to make it clear for the record, just so you know, that the caller survived and was rescued.
Thank you.
That's on record. Secondly, I have a question about the call at 01:54:14, which, if we go to the control report at page 55, comes from a male caller in flat 95 on the 12th floor. We looked at that just before we rose. It's the one that lasted 40 minutes. Do you remember?
Yeah.
That call. You say you do recall it. The summary says that you were told that he has two children aged 8 and 12 and can hear the fire in the flat next door. The question is, did you stay on the phone with the caller for the full 40 minutes until the firefighters arrived and rescued the occupants?
Yes.
What did you try to do to reassure the caller during this call?
Well, to reassure would be just, as you spoke about earlier, telling them that there's people on the way to get them.
Right.
And then the rest of the time was get everybody in a single room, just as far away from smoke as possible.
Right.
Cover the cracks in the doors, stay down low, cover your faces with wet towels.
Right. So that was the reassurance that you gave during the call?
Well, the reassurance was probably more the fact of somebody on the way to get you.
Right. Now, there's... a call that you took at 3:08:01, and just to go back to the control report with that, 3:08:01 is at page, we didn't look at it, so this is one I've been asked to ask you about. Yes, 121. 3:08:01, CRO Duddy takes a call from a caller who states fire whilst coughing. But I did take you to this, my fault. 92, 12th floor. And this lady was in her flat, one adult, two children. Now, again, this was a good news story in the sense that with your help, she was rescued. I think you said when I asked you about this before that you'd got them to the stairs but not down the stairs. I think it's right, and we can see this, and certainly we get it from the call, that you're on the phone while she gets down the stairs to the second floor where the firefighters are. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember staying on that long,
Right.
to be honest.
Well, it's 12 minutes, 52 seconds, and she's coming from the 12th floor. Do you recall that she keeps going back? She tries to go back because of the smoke, and you keep telling her to move on and keep going down. Do you remember that?
I can't remember specific parts of it, no.
Right.
I remember speaking, just continue, you have to make your way out, and then... But I didn't realise I was on the phone there the whole way down to the second floor, to be honest, no.
Now, nonetheless, this was, I think, an example of you staying on the phone and guiding somebody out through the smoke.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I mean,
Yeah,
at least
yeah.
broad terms, you remember that.
Yes.
Okay. Can I then ask you about the call from flat 193, 22nd floor? Let me just see if I can go through this with you. First of all, just a bit of background. There are two previous calls. There's a call that the caller makes to Yvonne Adams at 2:37 and 2:43. And then there's a second call at 3:05 in which you tell them to leave. I'll just show you the control room report for that. 3:05:09, page 119, Paul, of the control report. I'll just put the summary to you of that call. It's at 3:05:09, CRO Duddy takes a call from a B2 operator who has a caller on the line in flat 193 on the 22nd floor. A male caller then comes on the line and CRO Duddy passes the advice that they must cover themselves with wet towels or cloths and get to the stairwell. The caller says they cannot get there because they cannot see and it's full of smoke. CRO Duddy explains that it's the only option. They should feel their way along the corridor. The caller states that the stairs are full of smoke and CRO Duddy repeats it's their only option and they must get to the staircase. So you're giving your customarily clear and unequivocal advice, you told us before. That's the background. And there's the third call, or there is a third call to you from that address, and also a second call made from another family at 3:04:24. I just want to show you that. That transcript is at LFB 422. I just want to just have a look briefly at parts of the transcript if I can. Hello, we are trapped in 193. You're in flat 193. Yeah, we couldn't get out. We tried, but the smoke couldn't even let us move 1 metre. And then you go on to say you need to cover your face with anything you can find. We tried, we can't. And then halfway down the page, you continue to say, you need to listen to me, this is your only chance, okay? You need to cover your face with whatever you can find, cover it with water and make it into the staircase. There's firefighters in the staircase, okay? We can't. Right, inaudible, chance of getting out. We tried, but we can't. Send a helicopter or a ladder or something. Inaudible, try, okay. We couldn't. And it continues in that vein. Halfway down page 3, you say, this is your only chance. And then on page, and that's the same point, and the caller says, well, we can't. There's no way. You can't send a helicopter or anything. You can't. Listen, there's no other way. So it's pretty clear. And then over the page, you ask how many people are with you at the minute. Third entry down. Sorry, we can't. How many adults have you with you? Children. How many adults are there? How many children? There are 5, 3, 5, 7. There's seven people altogether. No, 7 children and about 12 adults. 7 children, 3 adults, no, 12. 12 adults and 7 children. 12 adults, 12. 1, 2, yeah. Hello. Fire is coming and we are inaudible side. And then it goes on. Now, just pausing there. Do you remember whether this is a man or a woman that you're speaking to?
If it's a call I'm thinking of, it was a woman.
You think it's a woman? The family members who have listened to the tape say that it's a man. In hindsight, do you think that's right?
It could be right. I'm not sure. I'm doing. Thinking back.
Now, if you go onto page 8, or rather page 6, you say, "Listen to me." This is 2/3 of the way down. You understand. You have no other choice. This is your only chance. You have to try and get to that staircase. I can't even move to the other side. We can't see. We can't breathe. How do we go? And you ask them to feel their way along the wall. And then on page 7, you say, and it continues in this vein, the 2/3 of the way down the page, right, listen to me, you're going to die in that fire unless you make your way to that staircase, okay? Do you understand that? Shall we try? Shall we try? Something would die if we don't try. Right, are you making your way there? Yeah, I think we shall try. Yeah, you have to try, okay. I think they're making their way there now. Right, are you on your way there? Yeah. And again, it continues in that vein. Please try. We're trying. We can't. And then same on page 8, we're on the 22nd floor, 193. Right, you need to get to that staircase. And it continues, and on page 9, it ends with, this is your only choice. Okay, I'm going to have to clear the line. You have to do this, okay? Well, we can't. We tried. Now, my question is, given that there are other instances of people actually managing to get into the stairwell, as we've seen from the other calls, I showed you the success stories, do you know why you weren't, or they weren't able to get out of their flats across the lobby and into the stairs?
Just assume just it was bad on their floor.
Right. Did you get any impression from what they were saying? We looked at quite a bit of the transcript as to what made them different and why they couldn't get out.
No, I don't remember that. I just remember that that was literally the only chance, only choice.
Do you remember whether there was any language difficulty or perhaps misunderstanding between you and the caller about how urgent it was and essential that they should actually leave?
Not that I recall. I think I was fairly clear. I don't know.
Did you consider anything that you could say to persuade them to leave?
Well, I think I did say you're going to die in that flat if you don't. Wasn't that on the transcript?
You say, I'm going to have to clear the line. You have to do this, okay? Well, we can't. We tried, and the call ends. Why did you clear the line then?
Because there was calls mounting up. We still had other callers to answer, and I just didn't think I was going to change her mind. Right. I told her, sorry if you've seen him or her, I can't recall. I told the caller just repeatedly that was the only choice. I just didn't think I was going to change her mind. I could have spent an hour doing it, when I could have spent an hour answering more calls. And as you say, we did have a couple of success stories, which hopefully there might have been in that next hour. I'm not sure if there was, but
when you ended the call, were you completely satisfied in your own mind that there was nothing more you could do to persuade them to try to leave?
Yeah.
What did you do?
That call has stayed with me.
I'm sorry.
I'm all right, sorry.
Yeah, are you all right?
Yeah.
We'll just take a moment to...
For me, sorry.
No rush.
No, just for me, that call was the worst part of the whole night. Hanging up was the worst decision I've ever made. Sorry.
Can I sit down for a minute? We could wait. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I've only got one more question. Maybe we rise. I don't know.
Sorry?
I've only got one
Sorry.
more question. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You're right, are you?
Yeah, I'm grand. Okay, thanks.
I've only got one more question.
Okay.
And that is, do you remember what you did immediately after that call with the information you had on it?
For the information, it would have still been passing the flat number, the number of people. We would have still been following the procedure, passing that to the scene. But then straight after, it was back on the scene again. Just.
Mr. Duddy, thank you very much. I have no further questions for you. Can I say thank you very much to you for coming along and giving evidence to us today? We really appreciate it, and it's helped greatly with our investigations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Duddy, can I just add my thanks to those of Mr. Millett? It obviously was a very difficult and distressing experience for you taking all those calls, as you've made perfectly plain, and I'm sorry we've had to ask you to go through it again, but
No problem.
it's very helpful to us to hear your account. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Right, would you like to go to the usher, please? Yes, Mr. Millett.
Well, there it is. That ends the evidence for today.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful for your sitting 15 minutes or so later than we would. It's been a long day, and I know everyone's tired.
Well, it's important to finish
Yes.
that witness in particular.
Indeed. Now, we have 3 witnesses next on Monday, also control room. and the also control room.
Right, yes.
So we will proceed with that. I'm not at this stage, I think, going to take the plunge of asking for a 9:30 start. I think on a Monday morning that would be difficult, not just for you, Mr. Chairman, but for others who wish to attend. So I'm going to ask for a 10 o'clock start. You nearly got lucky there. A 10 o'clock start, and we'll see how we go.
Nearly granted your wish straight away.
So there it is. 10,
Yes.
if I can ask for that.
Well, thank you very much. Well, we'll break there. I'm sorry the afternoon has gone on a little longer than we normally do, but it was important to complete Mr. Duddy's evidence, and we'll break there and resume at 10 o'clock on Monday. Thank you very much.